Good afternoon and welcome to our seminar with the Philadelphia chapter of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. I'm Kirk Harman. I'm president of the Harman Group, a structural engineering firm in Philadelphia, and I'm also president of the Philadelphia chapter. First, I would like to thank our sponsors for this event, Langen, JB&B, Bala Consulting Engineers, Turner Construction, and the Harman Group. The Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat is a global organization with chapters and offices throughout the world. The organization disseminates information on the design, construction, and operation of tall buildings and the urban habitat that surrounds those buildings. If you want more information on the organization, go to the website at ctbuh.org. And if you would like to become a member or get more information on membership, /get involved added to that URL gets you to the membership area. A portion of our proceeds today will go to a local Philadelphia workforce development organization, the West Philadelphia Skills Initiative. And Turner has agreed to match donations dollar for dollar that come in through this program. So thank you to Turner for that. And I would like to introduce Jennifer Downey, Director of Innovation, Director of Innovation, Turner Construction Company, and Jennifer has some remarks and then we'll pass it on to the panel. Jennifer.
Thanks, Kirk. Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Downey, Director of Innovation at Turner Construction Company. Turner is the largest general builder in the United States with offices in the US, Canada, and international. Turner's innovation department is focused on improving the lives of our employees, our trade partners, our design partners, and our clients, and we work to serve as a catalyst for change. Today, I'm going to kick us off with a few brief words about innovative trends transforming the built environment. So the property technology and construction technology spaces are just booming right now. We've seen a huge amount of growth in the last 5 to 10 years. And we only expect to see that continue. I don't know about you, but nearly every day I get multiple emails from new companies that are excited to tell me about all the miraculous ways that they're going to transform the architecture, engineering, and construction environment, leveraging, a whole bunch of different buzzwords from AI to blockchain. And while there's a lot going on, there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also just a lot of activity. So how do you focus your attention and what are the areas that are available? There are large trends in all these different areas, whether artificial intelligence or the innovation, Internet of Things, from virtualization to robotics and automation. And we're seeing growth both from people within the AEC community that are starting new companies, as well as companies coming in from outside the industry, looking to apply technologies that they've leveraged elsewhere in this sort of area of opportunity within AEC. So how do you focus? What do you take a look at? Because there are so many different options out there. At Turner, we like to talk about the topic of purposeful innovation, of really taking a close look at our business process areas and targeting key areas for innovation and improvement. And by focusing on those and looking for the areas of opportunity rather than just waiting for things to come to us, that helps make a more proactive approach. I think it's also really important as you look at technology and process improvements to keep in mind this mantra of love the problem, not your solution. One of the traps that we often see people fall into is that, they get really excited about a new tool or a process improvement. And in the process of investing their time and their energy and their enthusiasm into developing something or to testing it out, that they very much fall in love with the solution and lose sight of that initial problem. So keeping that problem statement in mind at all times is really important along the way. So what do you do if you do find something that you think targets that area of purposeful innovation that has the potential to drive change within your organization or the industry. I think it's important to keep in mind, as we're looking at implementing different things, that just change is hard. Our brains are absolutely wired not to change. When we look at the neural pathways that we develop, it's like paths in a field, that every single time you go over a process that you're wearing down the wheat in the field and developing these pathways that are so easy to follow. And when you deviate from those standard processes that your brain is used to, that you have to wear down a new path. But as you're going through that process, it's so easy to revert back to the path that was already there, even if you know sort of fundamentally that there are, benefits around that new process. And when we build habits, science has shown that it takes, as much as a month or 2 months, or sometimes even more, to build and develop that habit. We've seen this ourselves through different piloting and implementation. When we were testing a artificial intelligence virtual assistant, we talked to the pilot teams, we understood how much time they were spending scheduling meetings, how much time they could save automating scheduling meetings. They were really excited to jump in and test it out. But ultimately, it was so easy for people to revert back to the behavior that they were used to, even if they fundamentally knew that using a different method would provide an opportunity for improvement. And so we worked with the development team, and they identified in this case that 9 meetings scheduled with the tool was a really critical point, where people moved from a previous process to implementing the new one. So we worked with the team to develop a 10-step process where they not only built up the skill sets within the tool, but also had that repetition of behavior and made it easy for them to make the transition and change their habits. It's also important to educate and to engage. I think that, a lot of people have a lot of awareness about different opportunities for improvement, but this is such a rapidly transforming area that it's unusual for everybody to be aware of every opportunity. So one of the things we like to look at Turner are ways to provide information on both immediately implementable innovations, as well as looking ahead at the future and what that might hold, and how we, lay the foundation for the future in that. One of the ways we do that is through our annual Innovation Summit. It's an internal event where we bring together several hundred people from across the entire company, thought leaders from the industry and people outside, and focus for several days on, just providing opportunities for people to learn and engage and think about what the future might hold. We also want to pilot with purpose and process. When we test something out, I think often people think of a pilot as the step before implementation, but piloting is really about testing that hypothesis. What is the value that you're looking for? How do you measure it? How do you capture that information so that we can leverage what's learned during the pilot and carry it forward for the next group that wants to test something out? And how do we capture and prove the value? How do we look at metrics and engagement with key people from our operational staff and our front lines to identify what that value is and how we carry that information forward? So as we prepare for the future of work, what do we want to keep in mind when we think about innovation? And for me, it's really about 3 key items. You want to look ahead. We're always looking ahead, at least 5 years in the future, that sort of near term where we know where things are going, but we don't know exactly what they're going to turn out to be. This year's Innovation Summit at Turner, we had the theme of 5 and 5. 5 innovative trends that'll transform the way we live, work, and learn in the next 5 years. And again, we looked at processes both that are available now, but also those important frameworks that are being laid for as the technology advances in the next 5 years. We also want to help shape the future. This is not a passive experience. We're not just waiting for things to come, whether it's new developments or working with early stage startups like Versatile that you'll hear from later today, that engaging with these different leaders and technology experts to provide real world examples and expertise so that they can continue to develop and drive those innovations and shape what they look like in their next stages. And then also always keeping in mind being an archaeologist of pain. What are those pain points? Because those are really where the opportunities are in the process for improvement and for innovation. How do you seize those to be able to shape the future of innovation for the days to come? So thank you for joining us today. Up next, we have a panel discussion on the path to digitalization, and that will be moderated today by Jim Barrett, Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer at Turner Construction Company. I'm going to turn it over to Jim to introduce our fine panelists today.
Thank you, Jennifer. You know, you talked about growing wheat, so I guess I'm going to separate the wheat from the chaff right now. Right? We're gonna start to dig into innovation, understand what really is meaningful versus what are the buzzwords, if you will, because there's a lot of talk. You know, there's a lot of things you hear about artificial intelligence, blockchain. I want to hear from the panelists. I think everybody else does, in terms of what is really substantive and going to make a difference in terms of our industry. So let me introduce the panelists real quick. Paul Arthur Heller, principal at ZGF Architects. Paul Arthur Heller is principal with over 14 years of experience in the planning, design of a range of projects, including mixed-use developments, academic and research facilities, and civic buildings. Walter Meal at JB&B is a managing partner who is leading the firm's ongoing expansion to Philadelphia market in life sciences and commercial. Neil at Assembly OSM is the New York-based architect working in areas of fabrication, construction, and technology. Sean Burgo, lead AP project director, construction at Wexford Science and Technology. Sean is responsible for managing all aspects of the planning, design, and construction of the Wexford portfolio in Providence, Rhode Island. So let me ask Paul Arthur. I'll ask you a question around, what if I gave you $100,000 and I said to you, you have to invest that in the future of your firm at JB&B. It's ZGF, and you have to. Yeah, well, it's easier to invest in JB&B, right?
I'll just take the money and run with it.
So at ZGF, you have to invest that, and that you're betting on your future of your firm. Where would you invest that? What innovation would you invest in?
So as cheesy as it's gonna sound, I would invest it into the people, because especially in the world of architecture or design, it's not so much that we're relying on pieces of technology. Obviously, we're using, hardware like computers and all that kind of good stuff. But at the root of everything are brains, and having people who have actually the mental capacity of innovating is the key, because innovating is disturbing or disrupting, as you guys noted before, patterns. And having people who can see that, who can see the room for that, to improve a process. And I think what we saw, from the architecture side is having more diverse background in our staff actually push us to really innovate. Because by having people with, coming from the robotic side or more, statistic side, or, who didn't necessarily study architecture, they bring something else to the table that we wouldn't necessarily see at first. And that's just help us, rethink problems, as opposed to just reusing and beating the same drum over and over. So again, I think the people are really the key, because, it all starts with the brain.
So now that Paul Arthur has spent your money, Walter.
So I'll take a bonus, and I think we're safe.
So Walter, can you innovate without a culture of innovation?
No. It's exactly as Paul just said. If we had the money for investment, I'm not sure how far 100,000 goes with talent anymore, but it'd be about the people. And the one thing
by the way, these aren't New York dollars. They're somewhere else, like Iowa or something.
They're all dollars. They're all dollars. There's the key is the talent, and it's not the talent in any one specific. It's with passion and innovation. Our largest growth sectors in this whole innovative side of our business really has been growth of people who came in to do one thing and morphed into something else. Their passion took them there. So we actually just look for good talent with no specific role. That's a tough interview to say, we've got something for you to do, but we're not sure what it is yet. But when you get there, we will both love it. And it's been successful.
So Sean, so from Wexford's standpoint, I mean, science and technology, obviously it's in your name. I mean, along those lines, do you look at people fitting into job descriptions, or do you write job descriptions for people? You're muted, Sean.
I thought you were controlling the mute. I apologize. No, at Wexford,
I control only so many things, trust me.
I believe you look for people first, and then the job kind of fits around that person. Now, we have different areas, of course, you know, between development lead, construction department, and legal side, but it always starts with the person.
So, because I guess it's surprising. That's what I love about this this opportunity. I thought everybody would talk about AI, robotics, something that we talk about people is really interesting. So actually, Neil, your path does not follow the traditional path, right? Is it fair to say you've designed where you want to be?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, just by way of explanation, the Assembly is a offsite manufacturing startup that has grown out of Shop Architects as a separate company. So it's people with really diverse backgrounds, architecture for sure, but also including manufacturing, engineering, supply chain, you know, other these kind of different roles and groups as we've been talking about. So just kind of coming off what we were talking about with some of these different roles and how do you set yourself up for innovation, I think taking a look at the structure of the company and really what does that look to do is something I think that's really kind of missing. Because I think we can all innovate incrementally within all of the places we work. But I think if you look at the thing that's broken is there's the whole delivery of buildings and the AEC and the way we deliver buildings. So I think taking a step back as an industry, looking at some different models like how this works with manufacturing, like boat building, things like that is
Neil, I'll work my way backwards. So has COVID changed any of that? We all, let's be honest, as an industry, we're saying, oh, you know, a year ago, we'd say everything's changed. You know, we're not going to go back to the way we were. Is that true? Are we going to go back to the way we were? Is this an inflection moment? Is it a pivot moment, or is it not? What's your opinion?
So it's a question for me?
Yeah.
Yes, I think it is an opportunity. I think I think I'm talking more about the structure of the business necessarily than not necessarily exactly how we work in the office. I think that for sure is going to change.
No, I'm sorry. Just be clear. But I'll be clear again. I don't think my question is. This isn't about the office. Whether you're in the office, do business models change? Is this fundamentally causing us to rethink how we're going to do work, not whether we're in the office or at home?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. I fundamentally think, yeah, I think we're at a moment where it's accelerated a lot of the issues that have, you know, the cost of housing, efficiency of the construction industry, all these things that we're aware of, I think have really brought it to a head and really put some focus on it. So I think we're at a moment where we have the opportunity to reimagine and reconfigure, you know, the way we deliver and produce buildings.
So Walter, if you agree that there's an opportunity to reimagine, what are the obstacles?
In terms of reimagining how we work?
Yes.
I think old habits. Technology is not an obstacle. It proved just the opposite. Our biggest, I think, challenge is we can't plan right now for the next 6 months. You know, we have many in our office saying, can you tell us, can I sign a lease? Where should I live? How will we work? And I think we're really going to be at the mercy of what the industry is going to demand, what the markets will demand. When we reflect back over the last 15 months, we didn't learn to work from home or to use technology better. We learned to be flexible. And that's the message to our office. Your answer in terms of the new way of working is we're going to continue to be flexible and respond to what the industry demands.
And Sean, so you look at this, we have another generation coming into the industry. Do you have any sense of how they look at what they're coming into and the expectations they have for the industry?
A little bit. I mean, I'm going to take the easy answer or the easy route by saying I think we're going with a hybrid. I think we're going to come out of this in a hybrid situation because there's the need to get back to some of the normal roots of what we do and how we build. That's going to stick with us. I think it's missing. It's that the personal connection, the handshakes. I think some of that stuff is inevitable and will come back. But I do think the flexibility that Walter was just talking about is really how we have to be. You know, there's certain rigidity I think will come back, but there's going to have to be some flexibility to, you know, to some of the staff or to part of the staff. Now, as far as the next generation goes, the expectation that they're coming in, you know, either a year or two after what COVID has kind of brought us through, I think their expectations are that they're going to be able to be remote or not necessarily on site, and some part of that staff can't operate that way, but not everybody. So it's a hybrid, I think.
Okay, and then Paul Arthur. So I guess, given all that, what are you guys thinking about as ZGF? Are you thinking about that new model? Is there a new way that it's challenging, I guess, from an executive level? Now let's move our way up through the organization, at the executive or senior level. Are there thoughts around how you might have to change to adapt to a new way, not just a new way of working, not hybrid, you know, whether I'm at home but also just new business models, moving things off site, being in more controlled environments, looking at it as more distributed production. I mean, are you guys thinking about that?
I mean, we're always thinking about how we adapt to, you know, the changes through the industry and how we can actually lead the changes. You know, it's a little different from the architecture side because we don't produce anything. I mean, we produce paper and ideas, but, you know, we don't technically, I could be on the moon and still design a building. There's the construction moment where you need to have boots on the ground. But yeah, I think we always trying to be aware of what's happening. And then, as you know, again, it sounds really cheesy and counterintuitive, but as even, you know, Walter mentioned, it's really we're looking for mental flexibility. You know, in the industry, we always talk about flexibility of the design, flexibility through construction. But at the end of the day, you need also people who are flexible mentally, who can adapt and who are not anchored into habits. And sometimes they're like short-lived habits. We're not even often talking about, you know, 50 years of habits. We sometimes talking about a few years, and people get hooked on them. And, you know, a piece of technology is only good as the person using it. So you can, you know, bring like the best computer or whatever that is, you know, the next robot to somebody who's not willing to use it or who feel like that's not gonna work. I don't know, that's not gonna do anything. It's like, you know, buying a car and putting your horse in front of it because you don't feel like it's the right, you know, you're not comfortable driving the car. And that's, you know, in our side of the industry, that's been a lot of maybe some of the slowdown in the use of new tools. Sometimes often have been related to that kind of struggle with just embracing new stuff and being uncomfortable and trying new things.
Well, along those lines, what are those new things that you're looking at? If you're looking at the next, I don't know, say 3 to 5 years, what are those what's the next leap of innovation? And I'll ask that of everybody on the panel.
For us, it's gonna be to, you know, to be able to anticipate more and more the, you know, potential conflict or issues in a building. And, you know, that's how, you know, computer assisted drawing, you know, now it became Revit, has been really helpful for us. It's like that ability to massively coordinate because buildings are becoming more and more complex at, you know, a really fast pace. There's more and more consultant, the teams are growing. So the ability to really coordinate everything in a very timely manner. And so I think, you know, just to throw one, the virtual reality is one thing that's been, you know, it's not new, but we haven't always known how to handle it. You know, there was a big rush of like, we're just gonna do renderings and it's gonna be, but then, you know, it didn't do necessarily all the job. And there is a whole aspect of it that I don't think we completely explore yet, which is really that coordination level and through the design and even the construction, using 3D virtuality to really bring everybody into the same space, even though there's no building.
So Paul Arthur strikes about something, Sean, which is, we could talk about some advanced AI or robotics, but are there short-term things that we really should tackle as an industry that could make everything better, that may not be terribly sexy? I mean, are you guys thinking in terms of that? Are you?
I think so. I mean, right now, one of the technologies that I'm initiating right with the company is just streamlining. It's a software streamlining that handles pre-development through development budgets into cost and through construction. That sounds really basic, but having that automated, streamlined, the billing side of it streamlined, being able to then take that information, trend data, and generate our own data is something that is technology that exists. It wasn't always tailored to the owner. I think at some point it's been tailored more to either the CM world or asset management world. But the actual construction manager owner, we're starting to see some software out there that is geared to that. And I think that's something that's not sexy or fancy, but something we'll be adapting soon.
Okay. Well, I know, Walter, you guys think also in terms of that portfolio view, right? The sort of short term versus the long term. What are some of the longer term things you're looking at? What are the things you think are maybe transformative?
Well, it might be counterintuitive to what I said in the first question you asked about, pursuing talent. We're literally writing software that does what we do in the industry, the MEP design. We're looking to enhance how we deliver on speed and quality control. Now, we're not designing our own obsolescence. We don't believe we're going to reduce pursuing talent at all. But maybe now, as we were consulting engineering, have to really be consulting engineers and let the software tools do the mundane. We've been writing software for a little while now on how we deliver projects, right in line with what Sean was sharing. Some of it's not sexy, but it's moved the dial internally in terms of quality control internally. And we felt the time was right for us to literally move that into what we deliver as a service offering.
So Neil, you've taken that bigger leap, I guess, right? You try to disrupt and transform. How do you see your role? So if you can explain a little bit about that disruption that you're trying to bring to the market, but also your role in all this continuum we've been talking about. There's the short term, we're just trying to make things better. The longer term, where we're trying to transform. Where do you see what you guys are doing and prefab offsite in that?
Yeah, so I see that as addressing what is a really fragmented delivery model from, the architect designs the building, the kind of triad between the architect, owner, the people who build things. So I think trying to kind of merge components of that, which are actually, when you really dig into a lot of projects, are kind of just happening anyways at the more kind of subcontractor, specialist enclosure fabricator level. But trying to merge that stuff into like a more kind of cohesive product or way to deliver a building, I think is something we're really kind of looking at. So, and some aspects of that are pretty boring. I think just to go back to your earlier, it's just like we're like developing, or not developing, but implementing a PLM system or a ERP system, enterprise resource planning, to deliver and serve financial information across like the entire enterprise, things like that. So a lot of that is just kind of stuff that's like missing in the AEC industry in general, but is pretty commonplace in other industries like manufacturing, other kind of like industries that are kind of worked out, how to deliver things at scale with multiple suppliers, things like that. But I think also understanding that architecture is different than manufacturing. We can't just like adopt the software and expect that to solve the problems. I think there's really kind of a culture and organizational thing that we're kind of looking to work with, or just to kind of solve.
So, Walter, when you think about all this, what if you look ahead? This is going to ask you to be a little bit vulnerable, but what worries you about the design profession and what you, and your traditional business model. And I'll be vulnerable first. Turner thinks about that all the time. You know, we've been in business 120 years. We're doing great. We got tons of backlog. Everything's great. That's actually probably the point when we should be more concerned than not, right? That everything feels okay. I mean, obviously we're all struggling with COVID, but everybody on this panel, you all represent success. You're top of your game. You're world class. But what worries you about that? What concerns you? What do you look at and look ahead and say, man, I might be vulnerable in this area?
Well, there's a number of things. There's always something that's got us worried. You know, when I started this industry, there was no computers. We hand drafted. The sleeves of my white shirt were always, you know, color filled with all the markup pencils. I'm getting some smiles. Maybe people remember that in the early days. The buildings that we design now are intelligent. We've got converged networks. We've got interaction between systems. And we design, as an MEP firm, we design that operational technology for the buildings. Not all of it, but, you know, a good portion of what made that building once, which was very mechanical, now intelligent, remotely controlled, remotely monitored. And I think there's a tremendous amount of vulnerability as the building industry has transformed itself to intelligent buildings with cybersecurity. And also what happened with the Colonial Pipeline just in the last week. Anyone waited online for gas or saw the spike at their local station by 25 to 50 cents is living it. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think the whole industry needs to be concerned about that. And I think, you know, the only reason there wasn't a breakout in awareness, in my opinion, over the last 15 months is because we focused on this health crisis. But I do believe the next 5 years, Jim, there'll be a breakout in terms of awareness and, you know, bringing these buildings up to speed. As IT, the informational technology has grown on cyber, I think the operational technology of buildings needs to grow.
Interesting. Sean, your thoughts?
Sorry about that. My biggest concern is that as we move further and further into this digitization, we lose the personal touch and kind of lose focus on what we're doing, right? We're building buildings that become workplaces, neighborhoods, communities, especially, you know, here at Wexford, you know, we pride ourselves on building these knowledge communities. And I feel like as we start to digitize everything, that handshake, that meeting face to face, I think that's the thing that I'm concerned we start to lose. You know, there's a lot of benefits to these innovations and these technologies, but that's my biggest concern.
So you just teed me up for an unbelievably unfair question for Paul Arthur. So
That's why
as
I'm
we
here.
move to new technologies, especially around architecture. Well, architecture design. Let's say design. I don't. That's I don't want to limit it to just the perception of architecture, but design and the creative thinking around design. Are we losing something in the technology? That are we creating a generation that's focused more on the tools, creating cool 3D models, and not understanding the art, like Sean said? I know interpret what you say, Sean, but the art of this work.
Right. I mean, that's a good question. And you guys earlier, I know that, you know, you're like not mantra, but, you know, love the problem, not the solution. To not get in love with your computer. Just like we teach, you know, they teach in architecture school to not be in love with your drawing. Your drawing is garbage. You know, it's the process. And definitely architect has been, I think that's been part of sometimes the slow gain of technology in the architectural field, because that notion that, you know, it's my brain to my hand, and having the computer in between is kind of killing and making this insensitive kind of design. And at some point you even, you know, you can go into discussion about, you know, can a computer, you know, produce a design essentially, because it's a set of parameters, and, you know, there should be a set of solution. And especially because architecture is not an exact solution. If not, you know, I wouldn't be there. It's, you know, it's based on sensitivity and, you know, relationship with space. So there's, you know, that weird space where it's part of it is technical and part of it is absolutely not technical. It's just how you feel it, and it's based on your own culture, your own past experience. but I definitely am not one of those who think that technology is getting into the way of design. I think it's just a tool to help design and push it further. And so, you just have to approach it the right way. I think what Sean described is, yes, the tool doesn't, there's enough of like taller and bigger, and at the end, ultimately right now, I think innovation is about not getting taller, but it's getting more into your local community and integrated with, your surrounding, with your, as cheesy also as it sounds, I'm gonna sound like the hippie architect, but with nature, like that sustainability thing is not just a marketing tool, it's a reality. And so, but technology help us actually make a case for sustainable design. And in a way, it's, in a weird way, it's making some of the solution we were anticipating for some problem more realistic, because they are more cost, they're more, their cost is not as, detrimental as it was maybe, 10 years ago. So there's definitely a good aspect. I don't think it's in the way of the design. I think you just have to use it for what it is and not let it, eat yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So let me go I'm going to jump off of that to go in a slightly, I don't think it feels like it's different, but it's not different. I think innovation requires a diversity of perspectives, right?
Right.
You can't have a homogeneous view. That's actually very dangerous. So
right.
Is the design profession, construction profession, do we have enough diversity in the community that's looking at the work? Is that a weakness for us? That's unfair, Sean, to throw you at. I'm gonna throw that at you to start. But and what do we need to do to create greater diversity of perspectives so that we can actually think more creatively and outside the box? And again, I'm not looking for you to literally have the answer. If you did, you wouldn't be on this. You wouldn't be on this call. But if you had some thoughts on it, that'd be great.
I do think it's a weakness, and it was making me think about my previous statement that when you're collaborating, you're listening to other people's problems. You're multi-generational. You have some older folks, younger folks in a room. You hear a problem, and you start to think solution, and that's kind of where technology is spawned from. So to your point, yeah, the diversity of that group that creates that synergy and that back and forth is very important. How do we improve it is a bigger problem that I don't know how to solve it. I think it's engagement. I think it's early engagement in school systems. I do think it's not necessarily mandating, but creating some kind of pipeline to bring more diverse people into the industry. But it is a weakness.
So I'll turn to Walter, because I have this. I don't know. I have this. We've talked only a couple times, but I have a tremendous confidence you might have the answer. So you seem very, very trustworthy in that regard. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I think for a number of us, it's something that we've really thought a lot more about in recent years. And sometimes it takes some crazy events to get us to, to put down what we're doing on our daily basis and spend time thinking about it. When I started this industry in the 80s, it wasn't a discussion. And you just went about your job and you designed it, and you learned from what people did before you. But that means similar thought because they did it before you. I mean, think about what diversity does. It brings in diverse people who think differently. And when we think about a building, the building isn't just for, that one person sitting there. It's for every occupant who's a tenant, every guest of that tenant, and every person in that building who's running the building. And there's a whole marriage to make a building successful, from operating it to working there and to having guests and visit you there. And if we don't have a diverse way of approaching that and different challenge in the way we're thinking, we're just going to do it the way we did it yesterday, and there will be no innovation. So diversity is more about creating opportunity for the next generation. It's also about making a better building design.
Neil, some thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to be clear, don't have the answers. We can just enter some
Yeah,
thoughts.
that's okay. It's
Thoughts
unfair. I'm
today.
throwing out questions like these.
Yeah,
These
sure.
are massive industry changing questions, so I'm not looking for
That's a
answers.
bummer.
For sure. Sorry to disappoint. Yeah, I think as someone who is young coming into this industry, I think the immediate questions would be like, why is this set up this way? Why is an engineer so different than somebody doing design, doing something different than procurement, something like that? So I think there's room for breaking down some of the barriers to entry in terms of like very discrete disciplines and really looking at the way we design and deliver buildings by the way we've already done them in the past. So I think there's a lot of room for people working across disciplines, working with different types of people, like mechanical engineering versus industrial design. Like ultimately, it's all design. We're actually building things and making things in the real world, which I think is everything that we have. That's the things that we have in common. So I think bringing together different groups of people and legally not having those kind of boundaries and things like that, or looking ways to kind of challenge or alter that are definitely helpful. But I think to just echo some of the things you've already said, also having respect for precedent and the things that have been kind of figured out and things that do work. And if you can't bring kind of strong detailing skills to a construction project, you're not going to be able to offer kind of much kind of value to that process, for example, anyway. So finding a way to learn from things that worked well in the past, but then also find some new ways to work differently, because we have to solve building, not only diversity in the workplace, but the way our buildings function, the performance of the buildings, the quality, all the kind of things that we're trying to address as an industry.
So I mean, Assembly OSM is trying to reinvent the business model. What are the pain points you're trying to overcome, or the obstacles you're trying? Yeah, obstacles you're trying to overcome. Pain points you're trying to ascend over.
There are many. I'll say, as an industry, just the kind of power dynamics and structure around the developer, contractor, general contractor kind of structure, and the things that has set in motion, both kind of legally, just in terms of like precedent. So finding some things that challenge that, that there's definitely going to be some headwinds, as we've seen with Katera and some other places. But
you're trying to vertically integrate, right? That's ultimately your goal.
I vertically integrate, but to not self-perform every aspect and component and fabricate every single thing. So we want to work with the best suppliers for the different subcomponents, like curtain wall mechanical systems, things like that. So instead of reinventing the wheel, working more in the same way like Boeing does, and being able to source the best engine, the best wing fabricator, and really just work in a way to like assemble those components.
So Sean, we Turner have seen tremendous growth in design build, and we don't think that's necessarily changing. In fact, we've set up a division to start to harness that trend. How does that? Do you see the same thing? And then where do you see Wexford if this is an increasingly growing component of our work? What's Wexford's role in that?
So before I answer Wexford's role, I am seeing that trend. I think the more integrated kind of delivery method will solve a lot of these problems that we've discussed today. I do think, unfortunately, the industry is pretty risk overt, and everyone is trying to shed that kind of risk and liability. So solving that problem as to how we share in the risk or we benefit in the risk, I think is probably how maybe we get over that hurdle. As far as Wexford goes, we've shied away from design build, and I think we're hearing it more and more. So we're entertaining it more and more, and we listen to it a little more and more. But right now, we haven't delivered a building with that model.
So Walter, we saw there was a burgeoning interest around IPD. I think that mostly tapered off for the most part. I think it became and it continues. I mean, it's my personal opinion, a little bit of a boutique-ish type contracting method, but design build or a more integrated model does seem to continue to be of interest to our owners. Why might that be? And what's your perspective on it?
We've been very fortunate. We've been on 4 projects recently where it was a hybrid or an integrated model. The technology actually is what bore out a new genre in the industry, because the subcontractors on the mechanical and electrical side had to start producing coordinated CAD, Revit, BIM type models. It became a very sophisticated arm that when that arm decided to branch off from the subs and do it themselves, they created this new group that could be basically joined to the design firms in the middle. And in essence, allow Sean, for example, to begin shop drawings, support early fabrication of steel, and yet not award a 30, 40, or $50 million subcontract. And that, again, was all enabled by technology coming into the industry. And we've embraced that. And, at first glance, you'd say, well, are they doing it because you're not good enough at coordination? It wasn't the case at all. It was more of, let's advance, let's get a surety, let's get quality control, and let's bring in a group that's got trust from the build side. And it was a win-win-win. In fact, one of our recent projects, without violating any NDAs, saved months off and somewhere between 50 and 100 million off the budget. That's unheard of for projects. And I credit this genre, which is really new, for being a big part of that and bringing the design and build together in a hybrid manner.
Oh,
I would clarify, we design assist, Jim, not design build. So we've done a design assist approach with the major mechanical subcontractors in the past. Just to clarify.
Oh, yeah, and I think we've also engaged firms like yourselves in that regard. I think it still feels very uncertain. Where are we all going with this? Is this a temporary or short sort of stint we're doing around this change, or is this permanent? Are we shifting roles, responsibilities? Who's doing what? That's why I was curious about whether design build, design assist, who's doing what at this point, because it's interesting. It feels like we're at a bit of a pivot point, that maybe something's trying to figure itself out. Maybe there is a paradigm shift. I don't know. I don't know. I'll ask Paul Arthur, who's completely, because I love completely unfair questions. Are we in the midst of a paradigm shift, and in what regard?
Wow. Do you have another hour? No. I mean, I think we always are in some fashion. There's always that buzz or that, those discussion that, Walter just described, or Sean, and then technology sometimes support those, and then all of a sudden the industry, like shift. And sometimes it doesn't get enough traction for, multiple reasons. I think as the technology is evolving and people are embracing the technology, because again, that's very important. If, you can have all that BIM stuff, if nobody wants to use it, if the subcontractor is still drafting, that's not, you don't get the full potential of it. So, what Walter's describing is like having on all boards, on all ends, people embracing that technology, and then that can just create new solution. So I think things that we don't necessarily anticipate quite now, yet, but that's going to emerge as now more and more people are comfortable with having a computer and a mouse. And so, that's creating new relationship from, the design to the construction. And it's tying basically, the gap that existed in the past and making teams more integrated, whether there is a legal name for it or not, or there is a legal relationship, because that's also one of the key of all those problems. It's still making teams tighter, and I see it project after project where the coordination costs we have through construction are they're having a different taste, because it is, we're using a different tool that's allowing a different vision of the issues and anticipation from the subcontractor to the design team. And that's, we're making a more integrated process, which is a huge gain for the building. And, as Walter mentioned earlier, a few years ago, people were drawing building by hand. Just a few years ago, there was no iPad, no iPhone. And now, you know, like you see on construction site, people with an iPad, with a drone, with the little robots. I mean, you know, it's going extremely fast and the building are getting more complicated every time. And it's pretty amazing that we're still able to deliver in such a short amount of time, such huge piece of technology at the end of the day.
So
So prop to the design team, of course.
Yeah, we just execute your vision.
You got it.
Neil, same question. And this is unbelievable softball to you, so you better thank me afterwards. Are we in the midst of a paradigm shift, and in what regards?
Yeah, I think the things that are, I think there's some larger things that are shifting completely out of our control and outside of the industry that we are going to just have to deal with. The climate, economic changes, you know, just like there's large challenges to the way we've built things in the past. Just, you know, new requirements for building performance, things like that, that I think are actually going to kind of force the hand of our industry. And I think what I'm also hoping is some new ways of designing and working through some of those things. So not to just completely throw out everything that has been done, but to find some new ways of working enabled by technology that allows everybody, every kind of person involved in the kind of stakeholders in that project to really have some visibility and work through some of those issues. So like what Paul Arthur was talking about, just eliminating that friction or the kind of discrete set of like the architect does this, the contractor's in charge of this, the subcontractor's in charge of this, like everybody having visibility to what is actually happening with the project in 3D and kind of working through those things, you know, as an analog to the way it's actually going to get built in the real world in 3D is really the way we, you know, I think as an industry we need to be able to work to keep pace with these larger kind of changes.
So Sean, same question. Do you feel like we're in a midst of the potential for a paradigm shift? If not, that's fine. But if so, in what regard?
Are you talking about delivery method or technology wise?
I would argue that they're intertwined, right? In some respects, that innovation often requires an innovation in business model as well to really leverage it. But so say both or either.
I do. I think that more and more it's becoming more important to us for speed to market. In order to get our buildings up, be able to lease them. I mean, that's what we do. That's what we're trying to do. And in order to get speed, we need to figure out that the traditional method of delivering that building at a shorter period of time or less time, still high quality lab building, life science building, that there's going to need to be a shift. And that's
so,
why
I'm sorry, but do you feel that it's clear the traditional method doesn't work?
It doesn't necessarily work because we end up dragging the MEP guys and we end up dragging it into a different model, different than what the contracts say. Basically, it's because we're pushing the envelope on time on every project. So I do see the shift happening.
So I'll give Walter. I'll give you the last word on that. It's a sort of broad question. Are we seeing ourselves in the early stages, late stages, middle? I don't know, or not at all in the midst of a paradigm change?
I think we're in the beginning. You know, coming out of this crisis, it's made us all flexible. It's everything we talked about today. There's advancement in technology, smart building design, big push on wellness, and we are literally seeing, the graduation out of this industry, of the baby boom, and a whole new, set of generations of talent coming in. All of that comes together, and as Paul said, we're always in a paradigm shift. We are in a major one right now. So, we joke around. We say, "Hold on to your seat." That's what the next decade's got for all of us.
That's great. I appreciate that. I think we have to switch gears to the next to presentation, right? Off the panel. Or we have time for Q&A.
Hey, Jim, just to also piggyback on everybody, I think, as Neil mentioned, sustainability is one of the key things that is not anymore just that moon in the sky, but it's like that real, it's proven that it's not necessarily a dream. Oh,
We should probably schedule an entire event. The next
okay.
one should be around
We can.
sustainability. I agree. You know, with mass timber and
Exactly.
ethical sourcing, and
Right.
I mean, so we ourselves are absolutely jumping into that, delving into it, because it's not. It used to be sort of an add-on, right? We could do this. We're seeing from our clients and even our own corporate commitment that
Well,
it's
there was the
not
bad word on it,
optional.
premium, and it's disappearing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's a whole separate conversation. Where do you want? Where do you want to go next? We can keep talking about sustainability. That's fine too. You let me do that, we're never going to end. So,
Well, and you know what's interesting?
To not let me do that.
Well, what's interesting with sustainability and the word innovation is, like, right now, you know, if you take the roots of innovation, it has to do with repositioning. You know, it's not necessarily inventing something from the ground up. It's finding a new purpose. And, you know, part of the main, you know, trigger right now in sustainability are things that we see happen, and, you know, we can do because there's such an amount of build, is the repositioning of existing building. There's that, and there's the, you know, you mentioned timber, wood, the use of wood. That's something that, you know, humans have been using for quite some time, and that lost traction, you know, at some point, because that was not the most efficient way to do it. And now it's coming back because it's presenting a different kind of value that is not actually have a value, right? So there's an interesting here, you know, talking about innovation. And you know,
I appreciate that. Again, I think you've just essentially given us a subject for another event. Let me turn this over to Marav Oren, who's going to talk, I think, for the next 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, around the topic of using AI for making a smarter job site. So Marav is the CEO and co-founder at Versatile. She's a visionary leader who brings passion, collaboration, and never quit attitude to everything she does. Before co-founding Versatile, she was working on various efforts. Ended up working with her family, actually, on looking at the construction industry and looking at safety and looking at the fact that there was far too many safety incidents related to cranes, and why can't we address that and automate that? And then it grew from just a safety related to a productivity related emphasis, where she's really one of the premier startups in the industry at this point, one of the most successful. We've worked with her quite a bit. We think very highly of her. We think very highly of the technology she's developed, but also that she's focused on a key component of work and the flow of work, looking at the crane as the heartbeat of a job, and then allowing that to improve the flow of the work and the production and the rate of production. And so we're pretty excited, not just the technology. When I know from Turner's standpoint, when we talk to startups, it's really not as, it starts usually with the solution, but it almost always ends with the founder. And what kind of a person are we working with? And so we think very highly of Marav. That's why we suggested, and I think CTBUH was kind enough to agree to have her speak. And so we're excited because she's a great friend of ours, and we think she's going to make a tremendous impact on the industry, and she already has. So I'll turn it over to Marav.
Wow, Jim, thanks. Feels like a Microsoft.
I hope that wasn't recorded, actually.
No, at this point, I was like, I'm better off just leaving. Like you've keyed it up so nicely. Thank you for that. By the way, it was really hard not to jump in on some of your panel discussion. I was like, ooh, I have something to say about that. But your points on diversity, on what is really fragmentation in what I believe is a manufacturing process, and we'll touch that in a minute, as well as the use of my favorite buzzword is AI, but honestly, at the end of the day, it's how you utilize data to actually actually make an impact and make it actionable, or it's useless, right? And then I think one of my favorites, you were talking about automation, and I love the fact that you avoided robots and AI as buzzwords, but automation honestly requires us to understand and probably measure our processes. So just kind of keying off to what my talk is going to be about. And I'll also kind of like say thank you, Turner, and thank you everyone for having me. This is a great honor. I appreciate it. I think the one thing you missed on my introduction, Jim, is just that I do have a secret second career, and that's disappointing parents. And my father was a general contractor. My brother's a project manager. Sadly for them, I ended up at Intel. And honestly, a couple of years ago when I started Versatile and bootstrapped that company to where we are today, my mom kept insisting that I'm technically unemployed and was wondering where my life has gone. So I think that's my second and probably favorite career. But kidding aside, a couple of years ago when I did choose unemployment, the reason for that was an accident on my brother's job site, and he lost a worker that day. I think that change in dynamics of what was always a construction debate drove one interesting, I'll say, conclusion that guides us to today, and that's construction is manufacturing, and job sites are really factories. And considering that is true, and I wholeheartedly believe it is, why is it that our industry hasn't been able to control its granted most fragmented and non-structured manufacturing process on earth? And we wholeheartedly believe that we could. Something was literally drafted on a post-it that night. It had all the elements of what we do today. And I'll touch a bit about what it is that we do today and how we utilize the crane to get that done. But honestly, if I fast forward a couple of years, I'm just honored to serve the incredible men and women out there in the field and in the office, and in a way that empowers and allows them to make decisions with significant power of data. And I'll also say to Jennifer's earlier point, we're definitely in love with the problem. We're in love with the industry. We come from the industry, and I think that makes a huge difference to our ability to actually serve, do that well. I'll say I kind of hate this McKinsey graph, and I'm sure everyone has seen this a million times, but it does tell the story of manufacturing, which is kind of why I bring it up. But McKinsey late or like mid last year has also quantified what's on the table for the industry not making that jump, or to me, just not measuring, automating, controlling its own processes. And they quoted a $265 billion. I'll say it's probably missing a couple. But just to frame what I mean when I say opportunity in actually controlling our processes. And I'll say another thing, measuring is that first step. We can only improve what we can actually measure. And for years, our industry has relied on estimates and averages at best to actually know how long things will take us. But when we collect, and I'll say collecting data comes in many ways. So I'll touch on what Versatile and CraneView does, but at this point I'm talking about, and hopefully can be heard on the message of, let's start measuring as an industry. Forget how, use a stopwatch. But when we actually do collect accurate and significantly transformational production data, that drives actionable, it makes it actionable. And actually improvement becomes measurable on all levels. That would be productivity, predictability, which is one of my favorites, I guess, and as well as safety. And I've chosen a couple of examples, and I'll get into more details on all of them. Probably one of my favorite quotes, and I heard that this was a hearsay, but still worth mentioning, was a discussion with one of the large general contractors about innovation. I think it was one of the project managers or senior project manager that said something like, am I expected to pay for this now? And I believe it was the CFO that said, we're so used to paying for inefficiencies as they're baked into our budgets and into our schedules. Maybe it's time we actually paid for the solutions and for the things that can shed light on those events and just change the way we operate. So I kind of love the way she actually framed it. The examples I'm using just for the power of measurement. So just imagine if you could actually improve 30% of cycle times, and cycle time is everything, right? It would be, you know, how long it takes us to install pretty much any element. It could be steel, it could be, you know, columns, and I'll probably use columns just as an example. On a casting place project, 512 of those columns were actually timed or at least planned for 15 minutes each. And by measuring, they actually realized it's 18 minutes per column and not 15. By pushing the limits on what they now knew about their own cycle and their own process, that team that to me is incredibly talented. It's always about the people. I think you guys said that too. It's what the people can actually do with that information. They drove it all the way to 6 times 512, mind you. They priced their minute at $186 per minute. I know of job sites that would price that significantly higher. I'll give a quick shout out to Stanford University as well. They actually did a research on the power of automated measuring. And full disclosure, we had something to do with that research, partnering with a GC and with Stanford, actually helping a PhD student actually get his PhD. But their conclusion was mind-blowing even to me, with at least 35% improvement on the ability to control errors on forward-looking schedules, as well as a staggering over 90% on predictability. And in that case, it was prefab, and their ability to actually predict how many panels they're going to set enable them to know exactly how many panels should actually be on that track. So completely avoid what we all know as like some pieces will be left on the ground because we just didn't make it today, versus everyone goes home early. We could have done so much more, but we set everything that was on the track. So it really did incredibly well for that predictability, allowing them to get, by the way, 58 panels, I believe, were set on one of those days. They started off at 20. And not entirely like that. That is a very specific measurement where it comes to the crane, but the ability to demobilize a crane or any other key element on our job site, even a week earlier, actually, it doesn't just hit the bottom line. It starts impacting everything else, including insurance and the owners. It just reduces risk in a way that I personally appreciate. So I won't touch much about why now. Hopefully, you know, with the previous discussion, we all recognize that now is the time. There's an old Chinese saying that I believe it goes like, what's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. What's the second best time? Right now. And I think that tree is data. And Jim, you guys and Turner, you've probably, at least for where Versal is concerned, you started planting those trees over a year, actually almost 2 years ago. And I wholeheartedly believe the benefits that I'm stating on this slide, and I won't go into details, they multiply as experience grows, as people understand and kind of like have the ability to utilize the tools in more ways than anyone ever thought was possible. No time like the present, especially as the revolution has actually begun. I will get into one very specific example where it comes to measuring. One of my favorites, I was actually on, to some extent, on a case study that we published. But here's the power of measuring. If we plan our schedule for the spandrels in this case to chase the fireproofing up the building. And the schedule was set for roughly 98 or 84 days. There was an assumption made and then measured, by the way, where it comes to how long it takes to set a panel. When that started drifting, the ability of the team, the specific team in this case, to actually have an early notification, not only of the fact that they have what we like to call an outlier. So their regular benchmark, which the industry wouldn't even know earlier on, is now no longer 30, it's 40 minutes a panel. But take it to the next level and actually say where those additional 10 minutes are coming from. I think I was there, and I think the initial response by the team was, yeah, sure, we just changed the operator, he must be slower. But the way we actually break down the data allowed us to see that motion time hasn't changed at all. And the entire 10 minutes were coming from what we call step 4, or installation. That enabled the superintendent to actually immediately recognize where the problem was, address it with the specific subcontractor, and not only get back to track and save those potential 70 days of float that no one will ever know how and when they got hit, but actually get it back to 28 minutes, and with incredible collaboration between all involved. I think I was mainly amazed by that. The conversation just cut straight to the chase of, we know the problem and we also know how to fix it. Let's get to work. To me, that was a very inspiring moment. I'll say I'm inspired by the teams that we serve very often, and I sometimes even get teased about literally being our customer's biggest fan, but I am, because everything that I can show you, or that any data can show you, is only as good as what those teams will do with it, and they are incredible. I'll take it one step further. So now that we have the data and we are actually measuring and we have a benchmark, we also know we can control it so it will never slip back to 40 minutes per panel. And that's true, again, for any cycle or any process on a job site. Can we actually get better? So if we know they were chasing fireproofing up the building, we can now calculate the ROI of actually doubling that team, knowing that we can control the rate of the panels and complete the entire cycle in 36 days rather than 85. Do the math, or even 80, yeah, 36. Even if they slipped, by the way, so let's say we don't control the process as well as I know we can, you're still doing much, much better than the original plan, now that you know how long things really take. And to me, that's the true power of measuring. I will do a bit of a brag, I guess, where it comes to what Versatile does, but I'll point you to that QR code that actually leads to the Turner case study that was published that would give you more information specifically about that. I'm using some of the screens on this slide, but another side of data collection and kind of like the ability to non-invasively, I'll say, transform the way we operate goes through naturally fitting the workflows. So if we could just get data out and be non-intrusive pretty much in every step of the process, but then communicate it back just as naturally fitting the workflows, by the way, using texts and emails just before pod rather than a dashboard that potentially no one will look at. Cut through the noise just a little bit and give the person that needs the information what they need when they need it. You might just see even more miracles, I'll say, happen on site. And we at Versatile pretty much chose what I believe is the center of productivity, which is the crane, as the starting point for that. And it's amazing what stories that one piece of pacemaker and barometer can tell us about what happened before and after things actually got on the hook. That ability to measure and understand our process. From what my team many times called just a keyhole, kind of like look into the job site. But boy, what a keyhole that is. in a very simplistic way, I'll explain what it is that Crane View does. As I said, I believe it's the first step for controlling the process, and it's the first step on measuring, and that non-intrusiveness that I mentioned, and I wholeheartedly believe is key as a key element to everything we do. It starts with collecting the data, and that naturally fits the workflows as well. So what is it that we're building? What are the models? What are the schedules? What are the constraints? And we will take any piece of information. It could be, I've seen us take a PDF as well as a drawing on a piece of paper that was scanned. So truly everything, there's no limitation to how we digest the information. But we educate the platform enough to be able to know what it is. And back to the column example, we now know it's 512 columns, and we know it was assumed to take 15 minutes upon a column. And we also know where they are and what might be other limitations around it. Then installation itself, which swear to God is, I used to say 6 seconds, but it's really 4. I have a quick video following this slide. And that's where the magic begins. We interpret what the hook is telling us and kind of like bring it to life with the data that we collected at onboarding. And it really becomes magical at 5 a.m. the next morning, where you see your first digest, and the ability to interpret what it is that we see into those benchmarks and outliers, to how we organize our job site, to how we really utilize in our Crane, to hook time, to a million other things that again are very specific to the person that receives that specific digest. And then it's about monitoring. It's about driving what we now know is 18 minutes on those columns all the way to 6. I've seen the teams just literally gamify it, because when you could quickly trial and error and actually get what I call a quick feedback feed forward loop, there's no limit to what you can do, really.
Hey, Merav, actually, we only have probably, let me think, 6 minutes.
A couple of minutes.
Yeah, for Chris Beck to close this out. Can I ask a question? Because these are unfair as usual, because I already know you. But so one of the interesting aspects of your innovation is that you're making visible the productivity and rate of production of people, of the same people who have put the plan together of the productivity and rate of production. In essence, you're exposing potentially the person's failure. I don't mean it this way, but I'll use a very dramatic word. The person's failure to plan better, you're exposing that, but yet that's your customer. Your user is the person you're also exposing as not the one that may have planned appropriately. How do you deal with that?
Well,
interesting in innovation like that challenges, right? This is the heart of innovation. We can have all these cool things, but you want somebody to use them, but yet that user, it may expose the fact that they're not. I want to be very careful. People are doing the best they can, but sometimes it'll expose that they may not be doing things as best they can. So how do you grapple with that?
So I guess I have a different take on this, Jim. I think what we're exposing as issues with the process, and in 99% of the time, you could actually see that people are incredible, and their ability to actually take what is now real data that can shed light also on the errors on that process, right, allows them to act really, really fast. So what we're seeing is huge adoption and acceptance that comes from that. A sense of empowerment, a sense of control, and ability to actually take. The beautiful thing about problems is the ability to fix them, right? Like, if all you could do is tell someone they have a problem, but you have literally no way of showing them the way to a solution, then you might be right. But when you're saying, hey, the process is all wrong, you guys, I think one of my co-founders always says, good people, bad process, right? So if you could fix the process, people shine again and again and again. So I don't see it as a conflict. On the contrary.
Sorry, I was being a bit inflammatory in asking you that question that way. I agree with you. I think people are very smart people are trapped in very stupid processes in a lot of respects. But this goes back to Paul Arthur at the beginning of our panel, right? We talk about people at the end of the day, right?
Yes.
This is about helping people who are trying to do the right thing, but are trapped in a system that doesn't allow them to do that. So, but yet, innovations like this might seem threatening. Again, my question is, how do you approach people? What's that message you approach them with so that they feel empowered? And how much does culture matter? Culture on a job site, culture in a company where you're trying to introduce, because you see that you have a different perspective outside of those companies you're selling into. How much does culture inside of those companies matter?
I think culture matters, especially on early adoption, and you guys were part of our Lighthouse program, so
Well, wait, I'm sorry.
we were...
Let's be clear. I wasn't trying to. This was not leading you to say anything good about Kirk.
No, and I want.
Don't do that.
and I want Jim, but
we've got a lot of work to do. Trust me. Don't. I'm just saying, just generally, you have an outside perspective.
Yeah, so generally when we just started and we were looking to prove the value and actually have, I used to call it getting superintendents hooked, right? Pun very much intended. We were selective in the terms of the partners that we chose to work with at the early days.
Well, I'm sorry, so I'm going to interrupt real quick because we only have a few minutes, but what are the criteria when you selected a partner? One, two, or three criteria. What were the most important things? What did that partner, the company and the people have to look like? What were the characteristics?
So at the company level, they just had to have a desire to innovate, even if they don't necessarily know how, but the desire had to be there, the willingness to work with early technology. And earlier on, I was calling upon the industry to just adopt early, to allow technologies to shine. And I think definitely in our case, that worked very well. On the job site level, it was at least one person that would get excited, right? That would say, yeah, I'm going to be the champion for this. And I'm going to commit to this being a success for us and to giving the feedback. But I think the third one was the willingness to give feedback, especially for an early technology. Right now, since we have significant proof, and I believe we could offer just pure value to absolutely every stakeholder on a job site, it has changed to speaking that language of manufacturing, of what we believe in as a company and what we set out to do and how we believe we can empower the people rather than change them, and then pretty much show what the value and how that shines through. So it has changed from early days for sure.
Is it possible to get to a company that's not ready for you?
Now
have you run across companies? Yeah.
Well, yes, and I think now there are fewer and fewer companies that are quote unquote not ready for us. Though there's the books about crossing the chasm of technology, right? And when did you actually get more than early adopters?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're trying to get to. Is right there's that traditional curve, the whatever, where you have the early adopters, then you drop off, and then there's adoption thereafter, which actually after the chasm is the hard part, right? Is getting the early adopters love. It's like me, I'm an early adopter, right? I get every new iPhone, I get every beta iPhone software update, and they never work and they're always glitchy, but I'm okay with that. Those people are okay. You can target that. It's how do you get broad adoption with the people that aren't the early adopters? And what's your thinking on that really quickly?
Yeah, well, this start by being, almost fanatic about creating value, right? And people see right through that. They see when your obsession is creating value or when your obsession is creating a sale, for example. And that, by the way, that's the way we qualify projects and deals too. Like, can we drive value to that team, to that project, to that contractor, rather than, what's the size of the deal or how many deals we're actually going to make? I think that immediately resonates with the people that we serve and have the conversation with. And it really does help quantify and qualify the work that we do with our partners. So
that's great. Well, no, I appreciate that. I apologize for cutting you short. We could talk forever.
No worries.
And we always do.
We could talk for hours. There's no doubt.
But it's what's key is, again, what Paul Arthur said at the beginning of our panel, and you're saying it again around people and culture.
Yes.
It's so critical to the adoption of innovation. You can have the coolest, shiniest object in the world, But
agree.
if you don't have the right environment and ecosystem, the right people, it doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, I think that's the message we take away. So
Yeah,
thank
I
you,
agree.
Marav. I appreciate that. I appreciate
Jim.
that. Great.
My
So I'll turn
pleasure.
this over to Chris Beck, Senior Vice President from Turner Construction, who will give a few closing thoughts.
Geez, Jim, you had man. I got a headache, but it's a good. It's a thought-provoking headache, right? And I get the easiest part. I get to say thanks. I get to say thanks to everyone, right? I mean, Jennifer, every time I hear you speak, I learn something. Walt, Neil, Sean, Paul, Arthur, huge kudos for having to pivot every time Jim went somewhere, and then interrupted Jim, went somewhere else with a question. Jim, moderator, I'll attend any kind of symposium you've got. It's very intriguing to hear where you go with the Q&A. Marav, you had me at Cycles. Cycles rate of production, my legs start shaking. That's what all we do when we build. And I want to expose where the areas are. I want to go there and figure out how to drive change. So with all of that, huge appreciation. Thank you to the board for giving us the venue here. A fellow colleague and board member, Janine, she did all the heavy lifting, integral with event managers, Bridget and Tanya from HQ or the mothership CTBUH. Doesn't happen without sponsorship. Harman, JB&B, Langen, Bala, and it doesn't happen without you, everyone that attended and got the benefit of this discussion. So I hope everybody's leaving with the same good headache that I've got, and you keep thinking through how to work with our people and really take the thought-provoking innovation, bring it into our industry, and drive change. So look forward to working with all of you in the future here. So I think with that, I think it's a wrap.